All right, testing 1 2 3. Can you hear me? Testing 1 2 3. All right, sweet. Looks like we might be back in business, everybody. We'll just give it a couple more minutes for people to show back up if people have not gone on to do other things tonight. Let's see here. See, from my end, the only issues appear to be there is a very high latency, so there's a pretty significant lag from my end. So for making comments and whatnot, I can't read them until until about 30 seconds has elapsed. Yeah, for everybody interested, I figured out what that weird trial sort of robot noise computer voice was in the background. It was some random widget that was in the software program that I'm using to stream tonight, and it did not like the fact that I was using it without paying for it, even though this is a free service. It's like that adware stuff that gets put in with every software package, so that was kind of annoying. And then when I went to go delete it, it completely crashed the entire program, and I had to restart my entire computer. So getting everything started off just right. So we'll give it a couple more minutes here for everybody to show back up, and then we'll dive right into this. I'll breeze through it tonight, just because it's already we're already half an hour late, but I did want to cover just a few slides for everybody. Yeah, the microphone's a little bit quiet tonight, but I think I've got it maxed out. All right, everybody, what do you say we go ahead and get started? So, is it doing the trial thing again, or is that just? I swear I thought I had gotten rid of that. Yeah, sorry I'm glitching out a little bit on my end, but we'll go ahead and get started if you guys are all right with it. So let's go ahead and kick off with the first slide here. And just like in every normal classic S2 brief, we're going to start with the weather. Now, I know this is everyone's most exciting and favorite topic, but don't worry, this is really simple. Granted, this is not something that we would normally particularly cover because we don't necessarily really need to right now, but we just wanted to get everybody familiar with the format. So these graphics show the cloud cover, or really the weather, low-level clouds for the next 12 and 24 hours. So the way to read this is don't necessarily need to worry about too much, but I'm not sure if you guys can see my mouse or not. It's hard for me to see it. But if you can see the blue outline, that shows you where clouds are going to be, really close to the ground. As you can see, they're 1,000 to 3,000 feet, and the red areas outline an even lower cloud ceiling. So for those of you that don't know why this is necessarily something that we want to talk about, you can check out our other videos on cloud ceilings and why this matters. So for the next 12 to 24 hours, we're going to see a pretty good cloud cover along the Appalachian Mountain up into New England and the American Northeast, as well as some spotty coverage throughout the Dakotas there, as you can see. Also, moving into a little bit further out, the California coastline is, of course, going to be a little bit cloudy with really low ceilings. Makes it really bad for visual surveillance. If there were drones in the skies, chances are with a cloud ceiling as low as 1,000 feet, you're going to be all set, just in case that's out there. Once again, pretty remote, pretty rare, but just wanted to point that out. Also, along the bottom of the screen, you will see the illumination data. So EENT, or the end of evening nautical twilight for tonight, is going to be at 21:09 Eastern Daylight Time, so local time here on the East Coast. And of course, that's going to be pretty similar no matter where you're at in your local time around the United States. And also, your illumination level for tonight is 32%, so not super great for illumination, but if you have any sort of night vision goggles, tonight is a pretty good night to use them because you're going to have enough ambient lighting to make that worthwhile. And this next slide just shows a little bit better. It's a little more flashy. Shows the cloud coverage for the next 18 hours. So as you can see, over the Illinois, Michigan area, Wisconsin, and Iowa as well, you're going to have some pretty high ceilings. Now, the important takeaway for this is that just because you're in a blue or a gray area does not necessarily mean that you are good to go from surveillance. You're not. If you look up over by Maine, you'll see a cloud ceiling at 19,000 feet, or FL 260, flight level 26,000. So this just means that, you know, aircraft, if they're surveillance aircraft, can fly below this. So this is something to keep in mind, is that just because you're in the blue does not necessarily mean that you're good to go. However, if you go down south, down by Alabama, Mississippi, you'll see that the cloud ceilings are much lower. So that's enough for the weather. I just wanted to point it out for everybody who has not seen our other videos, and realize that this is something that's very important to cover. Also, keeping in this sort of theme of aviation, these are the NOTAMs that we have that are very interesting coming up for the next few days. So, as you can see, number 1 there, Lake Charles, Louisiana, and New Orleans, Louisiana. These are 2 notice to airmen that are kind of the same, so I left them as 1 bullet point. This is President Biden going to visit Lake Charles and New Orleans on May 6th. So if you want to know what times he's going to be there, these NOTAMs have already changed once, so I'd assume they're probably going to change again. But yeah, that's the times for that. And then also, if you're interested in checking out a SpaceX launch in Brownsville, Texas, you should be able to see it at that time, because there's a NOTAM that has been declared for that one. Also, they're launching another Starlink 27 satellite out of Cape Canaveral on the 10th, so that's a little bit further out. And here's an interesting one. I'm not sure if anybody knows any information on it, but I just wanted to throw in a couple of interesting ones at the end. For Martha's Vineyard, there's the number. You can look it up yourself, 1/0751. I don't know what that NOTAM is for. It's a very interesting one. Usually that's going to be a presidential one, but the authority in which that NOTAM was created was not using the presidential statutes, which is interesting. So I don't know what's going on in Martha's Vineyard. I know a lot of very powerful and wealthy people live there, obviously, and this NOTAM covers the island there, but Uh, it's something that I couldn't find any information on, which is kind of interesting. And then last but not least is Clear, Alaska, specifically Clear Air Force Station or Base. One of the more desolate areas of desolate bases you could get sent to. This is an enduring one, so you're going to see this one pop up and stay up for a very long time. Because this is the newest ballistic missile defense radar setup. So they don't want aircraft flying really close to it because of obvious reasons. So if you'll if you'll actually look at the NOTAMs, there's two of them that have been set up. That's kind of interesting, and you'll be able to see which direction missiles are might be coming in from, which is kind of interesting. So just get some practice when it comes to NOTAMs. All right, so moving along to more of the meat of the matter, here is the civil unrest forecast, or at least that's what we're calling it, over the next week or so. It's really hard to gauge these sorts of things. Predicting civil unrest is not exactly an exact science, but of course, in Minneapolis, that's going to be a hot button issue for the foreseeable future, especially considering today the Chauvin defense put forth a request for either retrial or mistrial or something. I don't really know. I didn't really read the exact details of it, but anytime that trial comes up in the news, it's likely to have unrest. Likewise, Elizabeth City, as long as the body cam footage from that one remains sequestered and not viewable to the public, there's likely for conflict to arise there. Same thing with Portland. Portland is just pretty static state of unrest these days. And Phoenix, Arizona, I just wanted to point this one out because the election audit is still going on there in the Maricopa County election facilities. I'm not really sure exactly where it's held. But that is a point of contention, mostly because that's going to be a high likelihood of having counter protesters meet together, and those are usually pretty good flashpoints. And then also Atlanta. This is a more recent one from just a few hours ago. Um, the Civil Service Board reversed the termination of the officer who shot and killed Rayshard Brooks. It has nothing to do with any criminal trial or anything like that. It's just that the board determined that the police chief didn't have the authority to fire him at that stage. So that's something to keep in mind. Is that could be a flashpoint. Atlanta is a pretty well-known place for demonstrations, so those are going to be the hot button issues to look out for the next week or so. And then also here's a list of other locations that we know of. Some more minor, low-level stuff, like today, for instance, was nationally is Missing and Murdered Indigenous Persons Awareness Day, which is kind of interesting, considering that I think it was the DOJ that created that holiday, if I'm not mistaken. Somebody can look that up and find out, but I thought that was kind of interesting considering the origin of the Awareness Day. But that's today, and yeah, just something to be aware of. I haven't seen any demonstrations. I don't really think this is a holiday that people really care about or even know about. So, but it's always something to keep in mind. Let's see here. And here is this slide is going to get really busy, so let me just kind of explain what's going on here. This is logistics. This is an overview of any shortages, shortcomings, supply issues, anything that you might need to be aware of moving forward into the future. And it's broken down by state, and also the list on the left is nationwide. So I'll just go down that list real quickly. Small arms, any kind of ammunition, any sort of firearm is obviously going to be in very slim supply right now, and you're going to pay a premium price for whatever you can get. Moving on down the list, service industry personnel. This is one that has gotten a lot of political sort of rhetoric behind it from both sides. Congressional Republicans and, well, conservatives in general, I suppose, have been stating for a while now that a lot of the service industry jobs are not being filled by people because they can get more benefits from the government, I suppose. More welfare benefits. Welfare benefits pay more than an actual hourly job in some areas. Of course, the leftists in the administration say that this is not happening. In any case, you can look around and see that a lot of jobs are not being fulfilled, and this is definitely being reflected in the economics. So we're going to go ahead and say that it's more likely true than untrue. And then up next is corn. So I'll go ahead and throw this graph up there. Corn is having a severe crunch. It's been making a little bit more waves in the mainstream news than normal, but this is something to absolutely be concerned about. This chart, I know it's really busy, but this chart shows the price of corn per bushel over the past 3 years. And as you can see, that spike at the far top right corner, that's today. So corn is now well over $7 a bushel, and it is the highest it's been in many years. Now, granted, uh, this could be applied to everything, really every sort of staple good that we have and produce here in the United States, but particularly corn. I couldn't list all of them on the graph or on this slide because it would just take up too much space. But yeah, that's something to keep in mind, especially due to a variety of factors. Likewise with timber products are the same way. If anybody's been to a Lowe's or a Home Depot or Ace Hardware or some other lumber yard lately, you know that lumber prices are ridiculous. So that's something to keep in mind. If you're going to need some lumber anytime soon, it's best to get it now rather than later before it gets too expensive. And then also there is this one up next. This one has been causing a lot more waves in the social media world. Apparently, there's a chicken shortage nationwide. I haven't seen this, and a few of our analysts working and living across the United States haven't seen this either on the consumer side. But apparently, it's on the commercial side. So nationwide chicken shortage. Also, I threw on there is a global shortage of semiconductor computer chips, specifically the ones for cars, for automobile manufacturers. Also, there is a shortage of chlorine, and this is an interesting one because this is one that we actually covered last year. Of course, chlorine is this time of year going to be very popular because people are trying to get their pools up and get their summertime fun set up. But also, a lot of states are still kind of locked down, right? So you're not going to have public facilities available, so people are more inclined to, go to Walmart, get themselves a rubber pool, fill it up in their backyard, and they're going to need chlorine to keep it clean. So you're increasing your demand already. And then last year, actually, it just so turns out that there are only 3 manufacturing plants in the United States that produce chlorine, specifically chlorine for pools. And one of them caught fire and burned to the ground in the aftermath of Hurricane Laura last year. So that's something that's going to take years to get back online. That particular facility was the Biolab facility in Westlake, Louisiana. It caught fire, and it's going to take several years to get that down. So good luck finding chlorine anywhere in the United States. Also, there appears to be a shortage of whole blood. We're seeing this come from a few different sources, but I'm not entirely sold on it. I just wanted to throw it out there because apparently, if you go to donate blood, if you've had any vaccines within the past 28 days, you cannot donate blood, or at least that's what the American Red Cross has been saying. So, with the rush of people going out there to get vaccines, it's going to be there's going to be a shortage of blood in some areas. So that's something to keep an eye on moving forward into the future. And then of course, all of these shortages are made infinitely worse by the nationwide shortage of truck drivers. So truck drivers not being out there and there being a shortage of them makes it really hard, and it increases the prices for everything else because you've got to choose what goes on that truck, and the opportunity cost for not putting something on a truck means that you could have a shortage of something in whatever state around the country. And then apparently there's also a shortage on pickles on the commercial side. I don't necessarily know if this one is true or not just yet, but it does make sense. There was a pickle shortage last year, but not a shortage of pickles. There was a shortage of containers to put them in because a lot of those containers come from overseas, and the containers themselves are pretty hard to make. When was the last time you saw a pickle that wasn't in a glass jar? So the actual packaging for the pickles is what's allegedly in short supply. And then moving down for each state here, the sort of elephant in the room is these big blobs over the American West. So this one takes a little bit of explaining if you don't live in any of those 7 states there. But these 7 states, a few years ago, started a water sharing agreement, or really, it was more or less a treaty on water usage and consumption and things like that. Well, it just so happens that a couple of weeks ago, the United States Federal Bureau of Land Reclamation released their 24 and 48-month models for water consumption in the United States. And their results were kind of alarming. In essence, they're looking at perhaps this summer might be the first time we've actually declared a water shortage as part of this new treaty agreement. Now, of course, everybody's heard of water shortages. Localities have water shortages all the time, but this is going to be a big one and something to watch out for, especially considering all those very powerful and influential people that have been buying up all the water rights in the West. So that's something to keep an eye on. And this is something that it's not necessarily binding, this agreement, but it's not anything to dismiss either. Arizona, for instance, if we reach that point in which they declare what's called a level 1 shortage, if they declare that, then that means that Arizona is looking to reduce its water intake by 1/3. So 33% decrease just like that. So that's nothing to be dismissive of for sure. And let me see here, make sure there's anything else. Okay, yeah, gasoline. Gasoline prices have skyrocketed in California over the past few days, as one might expect. Gas prices in Alaska and Hawaii are perpetually expensive, and you could say the same for California, and we're really the West Coast as well, for a variety of reasons. But if you go on gasbuddy.com, you can see that gas prices in California are absurdly high now. And also, in the American Northeast, there has a few different police unions have come out and said, "Hey, we're having a shortage of police officers going to our academies. We're not going to be able to hold graduations and things like that because of the shortage of recruits," which kind of makes sense. I would expect that's more of a national issue, but only the states of Pennsylvania, Delaware, and New Jersey have actually come out and said anything about it formally. There have been complaints, but it looks like these 3 states are getting hit hardest with that. So take that for what you will, make of it what you will, I suppose. But moving on to the more exciting stuff that everybody kind of wants to hear about: significant governmental actions over the past, time period, I guess a week or so, just really whenever I decided to put these on the slide. The first one, the one to get kind of everybody paying attention again, is a rumor that we've been seeing floating around on the internet and throughout various communications with the administration and the executive branch. The collection on U.S. persons. So the rumor has it that the Biden administration plans to outsource intel collection on U.S. persons to private corporations. And this is, of course, in this wave of anti-extremism, right? We've got to get those dangerous extremists out there that don't exactly exist in as many numbers as we say they do. But the point is we're looking at potentially federally outsourcing some of this intelligence collection to the private sector. Well, what does this mean? Well, if you're an actual intelligence analyst or has any sort of has worked as an intelligence analyst anywhere, you're probably screaming right now because this is a really, really huge deal. This is not something to be taken lightly by any intel collection. If you've done it on the military side, particularly, it gets beat into everybody's head, the regulations that govern collections on U.S. persons, and it is very stringent for the side of the military. Now, when you get into your 3-letter agency and sometimes your contracting jobs, it's not necessary. There are different rules that govern that sort of stuff, but just think of being able to, instead of getting a human report from the FBI or the CIA, you're getting a human report from Google. I cannot think of anything more terrifying than that. So that's something to keep in mind. We're trying to let every analyst know that knows about it to keep an eye out for this sort of stuff, because this is not good. So once again, it's still rumor at this stage, but it's so potentially drastic that I wanted to bring it up because everybody's kind of been asking us about it. Up next are the FBI raids this week, at least the ones that we know of. There was an FBI raid on Rudy Giuliani's residence, as everybody has probably seen so far, and also the mistaken identity raid on the Hoyper, however you say their name, residence in Homer, Alaska. So these are interesting. I'm sure that everybody's already read about these in great detail. But the interesting part about the Rudy Giuliani raid, in what's being really spouted on a lot of conservative media now, is that they did not take a hard drive that Giuliani told them had evidence of Hunter Biden's malfeasance on it, which is kind of interesting. So that's interesting that an agent, like, can you imagine getting raided and then saying, hey, I've got evidence of this crime that happened, and the people who showed up said, oh no, we're going to take your word for it that that's what's on it. Oh, and by the way, we don't want it, which is kind of interesting. I don't know if that actually happened or not. It is Rudy Giuliani, and honestly, the federal government, the media, and Rudy Giuliani all have the means, motive, and opportunity to not exactly tell the truth about what actually happened. So that's interesting. But the more interesting raid is the other one, the mistaken identity raid. That's kind of hilarious, because if you actually look at the evidence that the FBI provided as saying, hey, look, we were justified in going there. She looks kind of like this person that raided the Capitol. Look, from even a basic analytical standpoint, you can obviously tell it's not the same person. So that was kind of hilarious that, some of the most powerful intelligence collection agencies in the world still like make these gargantuan and hilarious errors every now and then, or in the FBI's case, more often than not. And then, sort of switching gears a little bit, this is kind of a sad one, but the Rolling to Remember event had their permit revoked for Washington, D.C. for Memorial Day. So, for those of you who haven't heard of this group before, they are a POW MIA remembrance motorcycle group. It's been going on for about 30 years now, at least 3 decades that I can remember, and they've every year they've been able to use the Pentagon's parking facilities in their parking lots to stage and have logistical support set up there, because it's there's hundreds, if not thousands, of motorcycle riders that are riding in this parade around DC, and they had previously applied for a permit back in March. But they had their permit revoked with absolutely no reason given behind it, and the Pentagon refuses to answer any questions about it. So I know this is probably going to get everybody's blood pressure up, but it is something to remember that the situation that we find ourselves in is just yet another reminder that I suppose there's no other way to put this, but that we should not expect any quarter or civility from certain aspects of life nowadays, and one of those includes the federal government, I suppose. So yeah, that's something to remember, is that, hey, these remembrance events, anything that has anything to do with remembering veterans or anything that might possibly be sort of related to conservatism, is going to be targeted, even if it is an event for like this event is, which is fallen soldiers. So something to keep in mind moving forward is that, hey, we're not out of the woods just yet. And then switching gears again to something that's kind of interesting is the Babuk, however you want to say it, Babuk ransomware attack. So this is interesting, and this is something that I haven't seen anybody talk about for the past 2 weeks, and I don't understand why, because it's so fascinating. Essentially, this group hacked the Washington, D.C. Metro Police servers and downloaded and stole 250 gigabytes of clandestine sources, confidential procedures, and things like that. And they're a ransomware group, so they steal this information and they say, hey, we're going to drop it on the internet for everybody to download unless you give us money. Well, of course, ransomware attacks, we don't negotiate with, terrorists, as the saying goes, right? We don't negotiate with these ransomware people because it never works. However, interestingly, a couple of days ago, the Babuk Ransomware website, which was on the Tor network, which is why I'm not showing a screenshot of it, they posted one last warning to the DC Metro Police, and they had a screenshot up showing the files that they had downloaded, the file names, like in a Windows Explorer window. And then, less than 24 hours later, everything was gone. Their entire website was shut down. They removed all references to the DC Metro Police, and they shut their organization down. So it does beg the question, and this kind of gets into the little land of tinfoil Hattie, right? So did they pay? Did they pay the ransom? Like, I don't know. There's no way we could possibly know, right? But I do find it interesting that after the one last warning was given, uh, all references disappeared and they didn't drop the files online, which is very fascinating. Now, it must also be noted that a lot of this is not necessarily out of the realm of possibility, because a lot of these ransomware groups are getting shut down or voluntarily shutting themselves down because uh, they're getting close to getting caught. So they, sort of like a band of thieves, right? In the old days, you rob so many places, you decide to hang up your hat and call it a day before you get caught. So a lot of these ransomware folks do that, but it does beg the question, what actually happened in this case? I would be very fascinated to know. Right, so that's all we have for U.S. news for this week. Of course, there's a lot more, but this is just the stuff you probably haven't heard about from us on other platforms. So moving on to international news, if I can get this to play, looks like there's a pretty good lag. There we go. So you've probably heard by now, but Colombia is on fire, figuratively and quite literally. So if you have not been following what's going on in Colombia, this is a conflict that is, once again, decades old. But here's what happened. The government, which many of the protesters slash rioters are against, the government is allegedly right wing, and they instituted this tax policy called the tributary reforms, which would tax goods like normal goods and services that most people use, which is not a good thing for a lot of the very impoverished nation of Colombia. So protests started, and then the federal government of Colombia decided to shoot some protesters. So bodies started showing up in morgues with bullet holes in their heads. And of course, that ignited more protests. And now it's just spiraled out of control into a bonfire. So that's interesting that that's kicked off again. And it's probably going to stay that way for a while, at least while the government feels the need to retaliate. Now, one must remember that in Colombia, this is not simply a government versus the people type thing. So if you're trying to pick a side as to who to support, it's not quite so clear, because in one video we saw going around that of policemen shooting at allegedly unarmed protesters. Well, we saw another video from another angle where the protesters were actually shooting at them. So it's really hard to say exactly what's going on unless you're there. So that's something to keep an eye on, especially considering the connotations for conflict in South America. Likewise, things in Africa are not looking super great these days. Generally speaking, you could take a map of Africa, put your finger on a random country, a random place on the map, and there will most likely be a significant insurgent, Al-Qaeda-esque, Taliban-esque Islamic insurgency there in that location. And Mozambique is no exception. The conflict there has kicked off a couple of months ago, but it's gotten really out of hand over the past couple of weeks or so, particularly in the northeastern part of the country. So that's something to keep an eye on, because of Mozambique's, well, really like any country in Africa or any nation in Africa, Mozambique has a lot of natural resources, in this case, natural gas and stuff like that. So Mozambique is kind of on fire in the northeast. And then Afghanistan, if I had a nickel for every time Afghanistan was referred to as being in a state of conflict, I'd be a millionaire. But with the United States pulling out of Afghanistan, this creates a lot of issues. So if the United States is in fact pulling out entirely and just leaving the country entirely, for one, I don't believe that in the slightest. But if that is what's going to happen, we have to remember that Afghanistan was a proxy. It was or is a proxy conflict for a lot of other nations. So, for instance, if the United States pulls out completely of Afghanistan, how can the Iranians attack U.S. soldiers if they're not there? How can the Pakistani ISI and their intelligence collectors collect on U.S. Soldiers if they're not there to collect on? So, the bottom line for Afghanistan is we're moving a lot of equipment out. We've moved a lot of HIMARS into the country to cover the said drawdown, right? I've been there for how many drawdowns now? But the point is that any time the United States says that we're leaving Afghanistan, the Taliban switches tactics. Instead of attacking ANDSF and the Afghan government, they start attacking the United States in true Black Hawk Down style. How bad would it look if American soldiers got killed right when the United States is leaving? So the Taliban increases attacks on U.S. soldiers when the conflict looks like it's getting ready to end, in an effort to push us out the door, essentially. So keep an eye on Afghanistan. We're seeing a lot of dangerous stuff happen in that country, and we know that we're not necessarily going to be leaving. So at least that's what we think. And then Ukraine. So Ukraine has been a wild ride over the past few weeks or so. Now, of course, the typical analyst CYA disclosure is it would take me about as long as the Ukrainian conflict has existed. It would take me that long to explain it because it's extremely, extremely complex. There's a lot of moving parts, a lot of stuff that wouldn't make any sense unless you were actually there. So just be advised that any attempt to try to cover Ukraine is going to ruffle a lot of feathers. But everybody remembers a couple of weeks ago where it looked like Russia was going to invade Ukraine with essentially every soldier they had in the region. And a few days ago, last week, I think, Vladimir Putin came out and said, "Hey, we're bringing all of our troops home to their permanent bases. It was all a drill. Don't worry about it. We're going home now." Well, we're not entirely sure that that's the case. In the case of Ukraine, I would describe the situation right now as the fat lady has not sung yet. It is not necessarily over. Because anybody who's been in the military or served around or near any kind of mechanized unit, you know that you don't just ship your mechanized elements all the way across, the freaking planet and just park them there and leave them there and your troops go home. That's not how it works. You can't just leave all of your equipment behind, which is what Putin is claiming they're doing. You can't just do that. Equipment that needs to be maintained on a daily basis, particularly the Russian equipment, which is not so great. But this is something to keep an eye on because it's the ultimate Russian, I think, Maskarovka operation. You've got to remember that Russia and, well, China, honestly, is the same way. Russia and China, both, throughout their entire history, have never commenced a major military operation without an equally massive deception campaign first. So this would have been great. This could have been a couple of different things. This could be a feint, and all of those troops are actually still there. We've been trying to find trains of troops moving back, and we haven't found them. We found a lot of Ukrainian soldiers saying, yeah, we're still here on the border, but not a whole lot of Russians saying we're going home. And also, this could have been a chance for Russia to push forward, test Ukrainian defenses, build a lot of structures. They build a couple of airfields, a lot of staging locations, and see what Ukraine does. And it could also have been a way to increase support for the Russian-backed separatists in the area. So this could be a whole other sort of presentation. We might end up doing that someday, but it's complicated right now, and Ukraine is most definitely not over just yet. And then, sort of ending on a classic depressing note, like almost all intelligence briefings do, conflict between Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan has kicked off once again. These countries have a very, very long history along their shared border, but the short version of this is that their several 100-kilometer border is right in the area where water is extremely scarce. Water for drinking, water for crops. It's a mountainous area, so there's not a whole lot of arable land. So these people that are living there in both countries are literally fighting for liters of water at the end of the day. And it looks like I'm going to see if I can play this video here without it deafening everybody. This is a video of civilian residences being burned down as part of the conflict. Now, it should be noted that both sides are claiming that this particular video came from the other side. So both Kyrgyzstan troops, Kyrgyzstani troops, however you want to call them, they're claiming that this was caused by the Tajik troops, and the Tajik troops are saying, "No, this was the Kyrgyzstan guys." So This is one of those things where both nations are pointing the finger at each other. Nobody really knows how this conflict got started. People think that it might have been started over a security camera being installed on the border, but that's not entirely like who knows? Both nations have the motive to lie, so nobody really knows what's going on there. But what we do know is that the overwhelming majority of casualties on both sides have been civilians. We've seen video after video after video, which I can't play due to YouTube's policies. We've just seen video after video of civilians being killed, and we haven't found any reference whatsoever to any troops being killed on either side. And we've seen videos of shelling of civilian areas. So it looks like both countries are doing the classic small Middle Eastern nations style of going right for the jugular and targeting each other's civilians right to start with. So, once again, we don't really know what's going on there. But we can say that that conflict is not going away anytime soon. It might get a little less severe than it is, but it's going to be there probably for the rest of the summer, at least until the winter time. So, before we take any questions, I do have one more that did not make the slide. Sorry, I forgot to mention this one, and this one is kind of tinfoil hatty, so just bear with me for a minute. But this one comes out of Iran. An unnamed 51-year-old woman was found dead in a garden after falling from her 17-story apartment building in Tehran yesterday. The woman in question remains anonymous. We don't know her name, but we do know that the Swiss government has confirmed that she was a senior embassy employee responsible for representing the financial interests of the United States. So the United States obviously does not have a diplomatic mission in Iran since that sort of fiasco back in the day where they kind of overran our embassy. But we don't have an embassy there, other than the ruins of the one that's there. But there's no active diplomatic mission. So if we're going to talk to Iran and have any kind of diplomacy, we have to go through the Swiss. And it just so happens that one of the ladies that was a key negotiator for the United States is now dead under mysterious circumstances. And I think that this is very interesting considering that Iran has been in the news lately. As everyone, or maybe a few of you have probably noticed, there were claims a few days ago in which Iran state TV, or it's Iranian state TV, but the Iranian state TV stated that the United States had agreed to pay a ransom for the release of prisoners. And they said the same thing about the United Kingdom as well. The UK had paid to release prisoners. Well, the United States came back and said, no, that's not true. That never happened. We haven't negotiated the release of any prisoners whatsoever. Iran's just, doing Iran things. But I find it interesting that one of the key people, one of the only people in the room that would know about this case, is now dead. And people don't just fall off buildings in Tehran. That's not how it works. The Iranians usually have a way of making people do that. So, something to keep an eye on. I'm sure that every other media source is not going to be focused on this one. But once we know the lady's name and who she actually is and what her role is, if we ever find that out, we'll be able to circle back around, right, and address that one and see if anything changes on our assessment on that one. But right now, the assessment is, I don't know what happened, but it sure sounds fishy. So with that, we'll punch over to some questions. I don't know, there's going to be quite a significant lag here in our chat, but I've got this going up. I asked everybody on Patreon for some questions earlier and didn't get any response because it was not enough notice. But if anybody has any questions, I would be happy to answer them at this time. Okay, what's the best method of recruiting people for the S2 for the underground? Well, really, it depends on what your goal is. Our mission here is very wide. We do a lot more educational stuff lately, but really just sharing our stuff helps. As everybody probably knows, we are fighting the censorship ban on every platform, really everywhere. So sharing our stuff, engaging, it really does help. It really does help get the message out there because we're fighting those algorithms all the time. So yeah, That would really help a lot. As far as recruiting personal people, it's not like we're a militia or anything. We're just people on the internet who share information. So it's not like there's a physical badge you're gonna get for showing up and supporting us or anything. But uh, yeah, it would be handy if we got the word out. That would be very handy, considering there's not a whole lot of agencies out there that are doing the same stuff we're doing. So, any other questions before we call it a night? Okay, what are your thoughts on Wagner Group / Russia in the CAR? I'm assuming uh, Central African Republic. France and Australia are there, but still Russia has shown up at the request of the government. I would say that I have not been keeping a huge ear to the ground when it comes to the CAR lately, but I know that Russia is everywhere, just like the United States is. You'd find Green Berets uh, in the really wherever there has a potential to be conflict, even if we publicly don't state they're there. There's some bad guys everywhere. So I would assume the same as with Russia. Russia has interests in a lot of different places, and Russia absolutely has interests in Central Africa. Because, well, really the insurgency is kind of throwing everything for a loop, but they want to make sure that they can have the mineral rights and things like that for Central Africa. So they're there. I really don't know what to think about it, other than saying, yeah, they're probably going to stay a while. Um, but yeah, hopefully that answers it for you. Okay, any more ATAC stuff in the pipeline? Yes, lots more ATAC stuff. The problem with ATAC is that a lot of the stuff for ATAC has a very specific use. Like, unless you're a JTAC, you're not going to have a use for a lot of the stuff that ATAC provides. And that's kind of a shame. So, because we use it for a lot of stuff, but in order to do that, we've got to get out in the field, we've got to take time off work, and that's really hard to do. So, we do have a lot more stuff coming out for ATAC, but it's kind of stuck in the pipeline right now because we've been prioritizing a lot of these tradecraft videos stuff. And also, we do have a pretty big project coming out very, very soon. I know I don't want to spoil it for everybody, but there we have a very, very large project we've been working on for months now that's coming out very, very soon. So that will sort of explain where we've been and why we haven't done a whole lot of ATAC stuff lately. Let's see. What are your thoughts on all the national debt racking up, rumors, Bezos and now Gates getting divorced to justify dumping shares before market crash? I don't know about how I saw Bill Gates was getting divorced from his wife. I don't know if what that means. I find that when billionaires do things, I'm just going to assume that I don't have, nor will I ever have, the situational awareness to know why they did the things they did, other than general stuff like loading the stock market or something like that. But yeah, the national debt is, economically, we're not in a great place right now. So we've definitely got a lot of issues, and inflation's creeping up, and it is definitely. I've noticed it locally. Just going out to go shopping for groceries, my dollar does not buy as much as it did. Both kinds of inflation are in place in my area. So yeah, that's very, very concerning moving forward. Let's see here. Message redacted. Let's see here. Yeah, I don't know why it says message redacted. I guess YouTube didn't like one of your words, so maybe ask again. Okay, moving on. Let's see. What's the best way to get involved? Do you have a general task list? Really, just following us on all of our platforms. We do drastically different stuff depending on where you're at. So if you're following us on Keybase and you've been following us on Keybase for a while, you kind of know what Keybase is all about. That's our real-time updates and stuff. Unfortunately, Keybase is being kind of a butt right now, and they're not letting us add new members. So join our Element. We're making Element a lot more like Keybase, and we're dual posting there as well. Same thing on Telegram and stuff like that. Let's see here. As far as general task list, not really. Just watch our stuff, see what engage. Let us know if there's anything that would be helpful for you. We're always we of course have a list of. Last time I checked, we had 487 different videos planned. 400, maybe 489. Different videos planned. So we've got a lot lined up, but as you guys probably know, it takes time to do these things. But we're absolutely flexible. So if you've got an idea for something, let us know. ITAC or Kill Switch? I'm not sure what Kill Switch is. I know ITAC is. I think that's a dead project. I haven't seen ITAC being used in a very long time. So if you're going to use ATAC, get an old Android phone, get a burner phone, buy one on Amazon for $40, or if you're smart, buy it somewhere else, and use normal ATAC. That's the best way. So we love to see ATAC content on piping and RTV cameras. Yeah, so as far as ATAC stuff coming up about putting in different feeds, yeah, that's something that we're going to be covering. The problem with ATAC that everybody who kind of learns about ATAC and says, hey, I want to get involved with this, the problem with ATAC is that it is a very, I'll put it this way, it is a very interesting community and app system. So a lot of the stuff like the UAS plugin, the plugins are controlled items, and there's nothing we can do about that. So if you'll notice, none of the content we put out about ATAC will require plugins. So that's what we're trying to work around right now, or building our own plugins, which is really really difficult for us technologically. Insane. Let's see. So, what's your input as far as having crypto with all the economic problems looming ahead? Cryptocurrencies. There's a lot of competing logic with cryptocurrencies. A lot of people feel a certain way about it. People feel, generally speaking, of course, there's different views, but generally speaking, the doctrine with crypto is when it comes to SHTF or disaster, whatever preparedness, free currencies. The idea is that crypto is not a good choice because if the grid ever goes down, you're not going to be able to have any sort of value. Well, the flip side is to that is that, well, how often has the grid gone down in its entirety? Well, it never has, Not that it won't ever, but as far as having crypto, I would generally say diversify, just like all your other economic stuff. Have a little bit of crypto, but also have a little bit of gold and have a little bit of cash and a little bit of in your savings account. We're of course not financial advisors, so do what you want. But I would say lumping all of it into crypto is probably not a super great idea because right now the world's powerful people out there are most certainly not liking Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, and they are doing everything they can to stop it. So I don't know if that makes it good or if that makes it bad. I just know that that is a factor, and other currencies don't have those constraints. Let's see. What's the 80/20 real life use cases for ATAC? There's a ton of features, but I assume most of them are very specific. Yeah, JTACs, really. Terminal air controllers, things like that. Being able to control aircraft in a military usage, right? Most of the time, if you've got ATAC, or if you're using ATAC, you're going to be using it with a team of people, and you're going to have an infrastructure. Well, ATAC is built from the ground up to create that infrastructure, but if you don't have it, like, I can't tell you how many times I'm out doing some kind of random surveillance or stuff like that, and like, who am I going to talk to? Like, who do I need to share my battle space with? Well, nobody. It's just me. So ATAC is essential for running teams, but if you're on your own, like almost all of us here we're alone doing our stuff a lot of the time, so it's not really that beneficial for a lot of stuff. Let's see. Would you be willing to do more podcasts interviews with other popular names in the Liberty Movement, like Gutter Fighting and Sensor Tactical? Yeah, sure. We did one interview with Gutter Fighting Secrets. We would be great to do that again. I don't know what their schedule's like over there. As far as interviews, they're really hard to do. We'll see, because our schedules are very specific. At least mine is. And I'm really the only one who's probably going to be doing this voice stuff. So, but yeah, we'd be willing to do that if we can make the scheduling work. Let's see. Yeah, Dogecoin. Yeah, it's that one's very interesting. But you can sort of like the GameStop thing. A lot of people are making a lot of money off of essentially worthless stuff, which is fantastic and fascinating at the same time. But I think that the real benefit from the whole GameStop revolution is that people learned how the stock market worked, and the stock market is just like the United States tax system in that if you know how it works, it has no power over you. Essentially, if you know how it works, it gets its power from confusing people. And the reason that people are able to make all this, a lot of money off of essentially worthless things is because people don't pay attention. So I think that the really big benefit there was people starting to figure out, hey, what's this stock market thing? What's that all about? All right, any more questions before we line things up here? Let's see. We've been going for 56 minutes. That looks like a good stopping point. So, if anybody has any other questions, I'm going to be available on other platforms. I will have somebody. It won't be me in Keybase, but we'll have somebody else manning the Keybase server for tonight. If you have any other questions, if you're like me, I know that as soon as the question and answer session ends is when you think of a question. So go ahead and send it anyway, and we might end up setting up a live stream that's just questions and answers if that's something you guys are interested in. So, yeah, we'll take all the questions that we have and we'll add them into the next Q&A session podcast where I can actually think and actually think of an answer before it goes live. So, yeah, thank you all for tuning in to our first live stream here. Sorry about the earlier glitch. I'll make sure that first video gets deleted. But I think we've got a good setup now, and we'll continue doing these into the future. Let us know what you thought about it. Let us know what you thought about it. Is that what I said? Anyway, yeah, just let us know how it went, and if you'd like any changes. Just myself, I know that I already have several changes to the slides that I presented, so stay tuned for whenever we do another one of these. I don't know what the schedule is going to be, but we will have these on a very loose schedule moving forward. So thanks so much, everybody, and we will see you all next time.